How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. We have news out of the gate with you, and that is that the Fed has chosen not to change rates. There you have it. The Fed has, none of us should be surprised at all, but there we have it. They're not going to change rates. And I gotta tell you that it's not just that the Fed's not going to change rates. This is going to provoke the ire of the president on this. And I'm just not surprised. And the president's response, I'm not going to be surprised by. Let me read you this. This has just hit the wires in the last 4 minutes from the Federal Reserve. Quote, from CNBC about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday voted to take a break from recent run of interest rate cuts as the central bank navigates questions about its independence and awaits a new leader. Meeting market expectations, the Federal Open Markets Committee voted to keep the interest rate in the range of 3.5 to 3.75. The decision put a halt to 3 consecutive quarter percentage point reductions billed as maintenance moves to guard against potential downturns. In voting to hold the line, the committee also upped its assessment of economic growth. It also eased its concerns about the labor market as compared to inflation. Quote, available indicators suggest that economic activity has been expanding at a solid pace. Job gains have remained low, and the unemployment rate has shown some signs of stabilization. Inflation remains elevated, somewhat elevated. The statement erased a clause indicating that the committee saw a higher risk to a weakening labor market than heightened inflation. That would argue for a more patient approach to policy as officials see the Fed's dual goals of low inflation and full employment more in balance. There was little in the way of guidance about what's coming next, with markets expecting the Fed to wait until at least June before adjusting the rate again. Quote, in considering the extent and timing of additional adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Governor Stephen Mirren and Christopher Waller voted against the move, with both advocating another quarter-point cut. Both were appointed by Donald Trump, with Mirren filling an unexpired board seat in 2025 and Waller appointed during Trump's first term. Mirren's term expires Saturday. Waller interviewed for the Fed job, but's considered a long shot. The routine nature of the decision comes at a time when nothing is routine for the central bank. I think that the president boxed himself in on this one. You know, one of the problems in the Trump administration right now is that the president is getting boxed in by other people on stuff. Like with Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino and Corey Lewandowski, the president really had no choice but to pivot back to Tom Homan after what happened in Minnesota. There are a lot of people on the right who want to say Alex Preddy put himself in that position. It's unfortunate, but that was going to happen. We shouldn't back down. I got a lot of friends who are in that position, but the political fallout to the president, he's worried about that and to the GOP. I know for a fact the president heard from a number of senators and congressmen after Alex Preddy was dead. He heard from a number of outside conservative voices. And the president really does have concerns about the direction, particularly because it doesn't get airtime on Fox News or Newsmax or OAN. It doesn't get a lot of time on other conservative shows outside this one. But the truth is, and I'm not making this up, American citizens and legal resident aliens have been rounded up by Border Patrol, not ICE, Border Patrol. and I mentioned this in the first hour, but just bear with me here. This is an important point you got to understand. In the United States of America, we have a fundamental right to travel between states. Now, we have to respect the laws of those states. So if you need a driver's license to drive a car, well, then you got to have a driver's license to drive a car. But we have the right to travel between states. If you live on a state line, well, you have the right to walk in to another state, and they can't stop you without cause. And one of the ways in the United States we manifest our right to travel is you don't have to have papers to travel. In some countries you do. In China, you have to have your identification. In certain European countries you do. And when you travel between European countries, even though they're technically in the European Union, you got to have your papers. I assume 90% of you know about the Four Corners in the United States due to lines of longitude and latitude and how the states were divided. Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona meet in a place called the Four Corners. And you can go to the Four Corners. It's actually a tourist destination. It is out in the middle of nowhere, and there's a monument. In fact, I've zoomed in on this monument now, and there's actually the only way to get to it is through New Mexico. You can't get to it from the other three states, but you can zoom. If you've got Google Maps or Apple Maps, you can zoom in to the Four Corners Monument, and it is where Utah in the northwest, Colorado in the northeast, New Mexico in the southeast, and Arizona in the southwest meet together. And you can go to the Four Corners and you can walk from New Mexico to Arizona to Utah to Colorado and back to New Mexico, and no one can ask you for your papers because you're an American citizen and you have a fundamental right to travel embedded within the Constitution. One of those rights in the penumbra of the Ninth Amendment, you got a fundamental right to travel, reiterated in the 14th Amendment. And they can't stop you and demand your paperwork, your ID, unless they have probable cause. But the Border Patrol has, in fact, stopped American citizens who are Hispanic or are black and African, and they've asked them to prove they're a citizen. You don't have to in this country. You have a fundamental inherent right to travel in this country. They can't stop you but for probable cause. And the probable cause cannot be, well, this person's Hispanic or they seem foreign. I'm going to ask them for their paperwork. That's pretty well settled in American constitutional jurisprudence. And yet that's what Border Patrol's been doing. And Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino, they backed the president into a corner by doing things like that, violating the fundamental right of travel in this country where the president's had to pivot. They boxed him into this corner. Whether he wanted to be boxed in or not, he got boxed into the corner by his own staff. Now, what does that have to do with the Federal Reserve? Nothing except this. The president backed himself into a corner and boxed himself in on his handling of Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve wants to assert its independence. And so by not lowering interest rates, whether you think the rate should be lowered or not, and by the way, I actually don't think the rate should be lowered right now. I would love them if they did, but I don't think they should be because inflation's still too high. Well, they get to assert their independence. The president did this to himself. They might have done a different direction, except they wanted to assert their independence. And in asserting their independence, they're basically giving the middle finger to the president. Jerome Powell is not only the chairman of the Federal Reserve, but Jerome Powell's term doesn't expire until I think the end of 2028 or maybe the middle of 2028. Historically, the chairman of the Federal Reserve leaves his office and leaves his seat vacant for the current president to fill when his chairmanship is done. Powell can't do that now. As long as he stays at the Federal Reserve on the Board of Governors, the Federal Reserve is going to cover the legal costs of this criminal investigation into Jerome Powell. If he leaves, there's no guarantee they're going to keep paying the bill. So he's going to stay. The president did it to himself. No impulse control. You at least need to recognize that fact. You may be mad at me for pointing it out, but you need to acknowledge that that's the truth of the matter. The Fed isn't going to cut rates right now. Now, there are other problems out there as well. The dollar has been plummeting, and a very, very weak dollar is a problem when we want to travel abroad. You know, for a time, a year or two ago, the dollar was very, very high, and Americans could travel to places for cheap. And American tourists were going all over the place because the dollar was very high, made everything else very cheap. Now the dollar's very cheap. Everything else is very high. And it causes us problems, but it causes other people to come here. Warren Buffett had this to say about the cheap dollar and investing.
And obviously we wouldn't want to be owning anything that we thought was in a currency that was really going to hell. And that's the big thing we worry about with the United States currency. I mean, it's the tendency of a government to want to debase its currency over time there's no system that beats that. You can pick dictators, you can pick representatives, you can do anything. But the people, there will be a push toward weaker currencies in the
weaker currencies. It can cause economic problems, and the dollar is actually trending up on this news that they're not going to cut interest rates. The yield on the Treasury is going up, on the 30-year Treasury is going up, although not terrible, but they're not going to do it. And they're not going to do it in their assertion of independence. And you know, the president also suggested a couple of weeks ago that as of January 20th, credit card companies were going to have to cap their interest rates on fees at 10%. And not a single credit card company has complied. Remember when Joe Biden announced that the Equal Rights Amendment was amended to the Constitution by tweet? That's essentially what the president did by fiat, saying credit card interest rates would be at 10%. That's not how this happens. That's not how it works. And none of them have done this, and no legislation has passed Congress in order to do it. And here comes the Federal Reserve saying we're going to double down on our independence. The president's probably going to lose that case in the Supreme Court as well. Of course, progressives won't be happy with it. They'll still say that the game is rigged against them and the Supreme Court is irrelevant and rigged, but the president's probably going to lose that. The president's probably not going to he's not going to help him when it comes to appointments. Look at Mirren's position. So Steve Mirren, his term expires on Saturday. He's the latest appointee by Donald Trump. He was put in to fill an existing term. The way the Federal Reserve terms work is he can only fill that term and he can be up for renewal. And you've got a majority of the U.S. Senate, not a majority of Republicans, a majority of the Senate, all the Democrats and enough Republicans matter have said, we're not going to allow you to fill this spot as long as you continue to prosecute Jerome Powell. These are the corners the president sometimes backs himself into, and he's then got to back himself out of those corners and find ways to do it. He, to his credit, the president has found a way to back out of the corner Kristi Noem and Greg Bavini put him on in immigration. He's now going to have to find a way to back himself out of the corner he himself put himself in with the Federal Reserve if he wants to fill some of these seats and deal with the chairman's position as well. Because the way the rules of the Federal Reserve work, actually, if the Senate refuses to confirm someone, then the president can pick from the existing members of the Federal Reserve to serve as the chairman until the Senate agrees to confirm someone. The guy the president would want is Stephen Mirren, but his term expires on Saturday, and the Senate's not going to fill someone else to that spot, so you're going to be short a seat on the Board of Governors that should be Trump's seat, and Jerome Powell, there's going to be an issue with the vacancy of the chairmanship. The president can get out of the corner. He can, but he's going to have to acknowledge the independence of the Federal Reserve to get there. Hello there. Welcome. Let's go to the phones here. Bruce, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Thank you. Doing fine. The thought I've had is the thing I see so much in these videos and so forth is a thing that's rage. And rage is an out-of-control, dangerous emotion. And people get into that, and when they actually do, they're somewhat deranged because they don't have any rules or boundaries. Imagine going into a church and saying you're here to worship God, but our message is more important than anything God has to say. That's just bizarre to me. But they also tell these kids, don't go to school. Come and we'll teach you how to protest. And the point is, they're saying that, well, our message is more important than your education. And these people are dangerous, and it becomes violent very easy. And both the officers in charge and the people need to understand, once you're close to rage, you're close to a bigger problem.
That's
Does
so
that make
well
sense?
said. Yeah, absolutely. It does. And, I would just note, I saw somebody earlier make the point that, we have two white progressive American activists who've been killed by Border Patrol. The illegal aliens they were rounding up have not been killed. They've been deported. And we increasingly have this violence coming from the progressive left, and this antagonism from the left. And the deaths are tragedies. They are. And Alex Preddy was disarmed, and it was clearly something happened. Someone yelled gun. Officers thought they were threatened. By the way, all those officers, Bruce, have been suspended this afternoon by the federal government. They all lawyered up, by the way. Every single one of them lawyered up. They knew they had a problem. They've been suspended, administrative action pending the investigation. This is a real tragedy. It is. But again, the pattern is pretty consistent, that we're having white progressive activists in this country who are enraged by what's happening. And the rage doesn't actually stem from the underlying issue of deportation. It stems from losing to Donald Trump. They don't like to be out of power. And every time the left gets out of power now, their solution is to get angry and protest and smash things and break things and overreact. And if the president can get himself out of some boxes he's been put into by others or himself, the Republicans have a clear path in November of simply don't be as crazy as the Democrats. Now, some of you, your computers are driving you crazy. You don't know what to do. You're frustrated. Your employees, they're not functioning at the highest levels because things have become inefficient. They've got to be their own computer people. You can let Vision Computers be your computer people. Outsource your managed IT services to them, and your employees, they don't get an AI chatbot to talk to. They get a person. They get a phone number. They call the phone number, and in 15 seconds or less, an actual human being takes care of them, solves the problem with them or for them, can remote in, keeps your employees productive at their jobs so they don't have to be the IT people that they're not good at. Vision's good at it. They can even build you computers. If they build a computer, the IT comes with the computer. Any one of you nationwide, from Hawaii to Maine, Alaska to Miami, you go to visioncomputers.com or call them at 404-COMPUTE. 404-COMPUTE. Vision Computers can take care of all your computer needs. They can help you deal with scammers and scams. They can help you introduce yourself and your company to AI efficiencies. And you talk to people, real people who give you real computer solutions. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. 404-COMPUTE, any one of you nationwide. Kobe, this reminds me, I've had several people tell me they appreciate the changes to the bumper music, so well done. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program? Marco Rubio has been testifying before the United States Senate today on a host of matters, and I got to tell you, it's a masterclass in dealing with the Senate and how to engage publicly in what can sometimes be a tense or frustrating situation. And part of the issue is all the senators actually like Marco Rubio. Even the ones who disagree with him and some of the ones who bluster about him, they actually like Rubio. They've long liked Marco Rubio. And so you kind of got that sense today that this is somebody that these guys – They tend to trust him, they tend to like him, and they're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt when it comes to things. Now, obviously, there's always the grandstanding in the United States Senate. It always comes up. But also, these guys know that Rubio gets the situation. There was the Tim Kaine situation with Greenland.
Last question is this. You talked about the speech in Davos. Here's something the president said in Davos. I'm helping NATO until the last few days when I told them about Iceland, they loved me. They're not here for us on Iceland, that I can tell you. Our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland, so Iceland has already cost us a lot of money. President repeatedly mistook Iceland for Greenland, right? We're not mad at Iceland. They haven't cost us any money. The president just mistook the two countries for each other, correct?
Yeah, he meant to say Greenland, but I think we're all familiar with presidents that have verbal stumbles. We've had presidents like that before. Some made a lot more than this one.
Nice try. Thanks. All right.
Nice try. No. That's the Tim Kaine. Nice try. You tried to play a gotcha after going through the era of Joe Biden, and it's really not able to work out for you. Now, this is Rubio as well on the tanker situation in Venezuela.
So you had basically three of our primary opponents in the world operating from our hemisphere from that spot. It was also a place where you had a narco-trafficking regime that openly cooperated with the FARC and the ELN and other drug trafficking organizations using their national territory. It was an enormous strategic risk for the United States, not halfway around the world, not in another continent, but in the hemisphere in which we all live. And it was having dramatic impacts on us, but also on Colombia and on the Caribbean basin and all sorts of other places. It was an untenable situation, and it had to be addressed.
He's right, and he does a very good job of making the case. Now, I got to pull up this clip that actually I just got literally while that one was playing. I was pulling this clip in. I'm multitasking because the Senate probed him on Cuba.
Your comments that Havana should be concerned about the Maduro operation is fueling speculation that this administration will turn its sights to Cuba next. Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to. That doesn't mean that we're going to make a change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States if Cuba was no longer governed by an autocratic regime.
But you know what we mean by regime change. We don't mean I wish someone else were in charge. When we talk about regime change, we're talking about using the power of the United States, usually kinetic power, but often other kinds of coercion. And I'm not even saying that that's always not in our interest. I'm just saying, I'm not asking you whether we would prefer a different kind of government. I'm asking whether you are trying to precipitate the fall of the current regime.
Yeah, but that's statutory. The Helms-Burton Act, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is codified. It was codified in law, and it requires regime change in order for us to lift the embargo.
Okay.
Yeah, listen, he's smarter than a lot of the people who are in the room making demands of him, including that senator from Hawaii, the Democrat.
Is toward Taiwan.
No, look, the situation on Taiwan is a G legacy project that he's made very clear that that's what he intends to do. And that's going to be irrespective of anything that happens in the world. Your point, though, is well taken, and that is the U.S. in conducting this operation, I think, was certainly startling to China, to Russia, to Iran, to any adversary around the world, because the U.S. is the only country in the world that could have done this operation.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just real briefly, I just mentioned General Zhang getting purged here. He was obviously a very important official in.
I mean, again, he makes a great point. There is no other nation on planet Earth that could do what the United States did in Venezuela. It's remarkable what our military is capable of doing. And good for Rubio pointed out. Just one more here. He had an encounter with Senator Shaheen of New Hampshire about NATO.
Benefits from NATO?
We do. I mean, the problem but NATO needs to be reimagined as well in terms of the obligations. And this is not new to this president. Multiple presidents have complained about it.
I
think this president just complains about it louder than other presidents.
Well, I'm just trying to be clear, get a clear answer on where this administration stands relative to NATO, because it's been a very fuzzy message over the last year. And do you agree that we're stronger in confronting China when we do so with like-minded partners, and that China is still the number one threat that we face in the United States.
Yeah, but our like-minded partners have to have capability, and that's been part of the problem is the erosion in European defense capabilities because they've taken vast amount of the monies that these are rich countries, and because of the NATO umbrella, it gave them the flexibility to spend a tremendous amount of their revenues on social programs and not on defense. Now, maybe that trend line will begin to change.
Well, it's already begun to change, frankly, and thanks. And I think the president deserves credit for that.
Look, I have concerns myself about the president's trajectory on NATO, but he is the president of the United States, and he's been way more vocal than other presidents who also recognize the problems. But all this largely, Rubio's a great operator, and notice I don't really have, I would find them if I did really combative clips. There just aren't any. This is a guy who he's got the credibility and the trust of the Senate. So I'm glad and I appreciate that the president has Marco Rubio in his position, and we can learn a lot from his ability to navigate a hostile Democratic body in the Senate, given what's going on out there. It was well done by Rubio. Now, let me get to the phones here. Randy, you're going to be up next. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Hey, just a quick commentary, and I have this conversation with a lot of friends of mine. Generally speaking, I agree with most of what you say, and I'm in full support. I like how you're not a Trumpster, but I fall in the same category. But to the interest rate, when the interest rate first started going down, it was under George Bush. He artificially lowered it. That shortly after that, we had the costs on housing go through the roof. The low interest rate, it sounds good until the point that I've got a mechanic friend that he said back in those days you could buy a house for $200,000. Now he can still buy a house for $200,000, but there is no such thing. So the low interest rate is actually causing more damage to the people at the bottom. It's helping the rich people that have great credit, things like that, but it's not helping the bottom sector of America. So in my personal opinion, and you've got the resources, I would think that a healthy interest rate would be between 7 and 11%, depending on what your credit and what you're buying, the risk, all of the other factors. But the interest rate actually, in my opinion, should go up.
So, Randy, I'll tell you, if you're on a fixed income, having a higher interest rate would definitely help senior citizens. Bond rates, savings accounts, things like that would go up. But for housing, actually, the higher interest rate is one of the problems we're having in the housing market right now, because people who got houses that when you could get a mortgage for 3%, they don't want to sell their house right now and have to get a mortgage that's at 5 or 6%. So a lot of people, particularly people who are getting close to retirement age, who tend to downsize at that age, they're not selling their bigger houses and moving into smaller houses because the smaller house interest rate is high. And remember, we went through the cycle of people with very low interest rates. They just continually refinanced. Every time the interest rate went down, people kept refinancing and just dragging out the payments on their houses over time. I think my family, we probably did 3, maybe 4 refis as interest rates went down. I think my mortgage rate wound up being, right at around 3% or so, maybe a little less than that at one point, and what it is currently. I don't know how I, short of winning the lottery or having this show suddenly explode across the nation and driving up massive amounts of revenue, I don't know how I can sell my house right now and move into a different house, because my interest rate and my home payment is so low based on the interest rate. And a lot of people are in that situation. You drive up interest rates, that affects savings accounts rates. That affects, people on fixed income benefit the most from that. But people just starting out actually are hurt the most by high interest rates, because then their car payment is more, credit card debt is more, student loan interest rates are more, mortgages are more. It drives up the cost of starting out. High interest rates benefit people at the end of their career, headed into retirement. Low interest rates benefit the people who are at the beginning of their career. And the offset for people on fixed incomes is that the lower the interest rate, typically the better markets do, so you can outperform the interest rates just by investing in the S&P 500 or the Dow. You wind up having a higher rate of return than your standard interest rate on your savings account, or you buy a CD, something like that. I've invested right now in a Schwab fund that's just it's based on bonds and interest rate, and it's getting me 4 or 5% right now. But and by the way, that's come down. It was higher. I've got one of those Apple credit cards, and it comes with a savings account. And for a time there, I was getting 5% interest on my savings account. But as the Fed has lowered interest rates now, the interest rate on that account I think has come down to like 3.5%, somewhere there, 3.5, 3.75. So I would just say that one of the biggest issues we're having in the housing market right now is not that interest rates are too low. It's that interest rates are so high still compared to where they were that people who got into houses and got really great rates on mortgages are refusing to get out of their homes right now to downsize as they hit retirement because they don't want to have a smaller house where the payment on the house is basically the same because the interest rates are so high. Also, as interest rates are high, I mean, the lending costs and the construction costs and everything else for new houses is higher as well. And then tariffs have impacted it too. I was talking to a home builder the other day that was telling me that his rates of costs have gone up dramatically, and that home prices, they've been giving just a couple of years ago, bids on the same houses now are so much more, not just because of lending costs, but the cost of materials due to the tariffs. The tariffs have also caused a real problem for people. The steel tariffs, aluminum tariffs, you've got tariffs on cabinetry and things the president has walked back and then put on again, depending on things. Tariffs have been one of the players responsible for driving up these costs. So I understand the sentiment of having higher interest rates, and if you're on a fixed income, they certainly would be great. But if you're starting out in life, high interest rates are a penalty, and frankly, it also kind of discourages people from wanting to have families, knowing what's going to happen with interest rates being so high. So low interest rates also help people want to know costs are going to be low so they can start a family without being overwhelmed. Welcome one and all. Glad to have you with me here. There is allegedly going to be a nationwide strike on Friday. Have you guys heard about this one? A group of progressive activists have decided they want to strike on Friday. Now, I want all of you to listen to me. Progressive activists are encouraging us all to go on strike on Friday. They want no one to go to work, no one to go to school, and no one to go shopping. I want you to know your host will be working on Friday. And I'm hoping traffic won't be bad on Friday wherever you are. And you'll be able to get to where you want, and you'll be able to get reservations at your local restaurants. I hope every progressive stays home on Friday, and we won't have to worry about dirty hippies. I think that having these woke progressives who oftentimes smell like weed or patchouli staying off the streets on Friday, I wish the left would strike more often, frankly. I don't have a problem with them staying home. You know how often you drive down the road and somebody is in a car in front of you smoking weed? First of all, I'm just stunned by it, and they stink. Go to the grocery store. We stopped having groceries delivered at the house because half the time it reeks of weed. So I hope all of you do stay home on Friday so the rest of us don't have to smell you or deal with your bad driving in the left lane or can't get into our favorite restaurants because you're there. I am totally fine with a nationwide strike on Friday. I mean, you people have already been striking from using soap for some time and shaving cream and shampoo. So if you just want to stay home on Friday, God bless you for doing it, or Gaia bless you, whatever your chosen Lord and Savior is other than the real one. I am 100% down, 1,000% down, 1,000,000% down with you. Just staying home. I'll go to work and I'll be productive and I'll be able to go out with my family to dinner. And you know, the funny thing is that the media, if this happens, they're going to cover it and they're going to make a really big deal out of it. And the irony is that it's not going to happen in a lot of the country. I mean, where I am, I mentioned that Ola High School in McDonough, Georgia, at the start of the show, that this Dream Defender group wants a walk out of the school. The principal, by the way, you should know, sent a letter out to the parents saying, we're not involved. It's not us. It's an outside group, and we are not encouraging the students to walk out and have no plans. Meanwhile, somebody told me a high school in Tacoola, Georgia, that the principal is going to walk out with the students, or did. It's not happening as broadly as the media thinks, but it happens in progressive areas where the media lives. And so the media thinks it's a really big thing. And more often than not, it's not a big thing. It just happens to be where the press lives, and they want the press coverage of it. I would prefer it if progressives did it in my neck of the woods, so I don't have to deal with them when I go out to the grocery store or go out to go grocery shopping, or have to smell them on the highway while they're reeking of weed. So I encourage the strike. I want you people to stay home. And if you decide you want to strike until Donald Trump changes his mind, I'm okay with you just continuing to strike. You just don't show up at work. That'll free up your jobs for other people in right-to-work states. I'm okay with it. I think actions have consequences. And if you decide to walk out of your school and get suspended, well, you've learned consequence. If you've decided to walk out of your job and you get fired, there's a consequence. Life ain't fair. No one ever expected it to be fair. The only people who want it to be fair are you people, who also want it to be done exactly the way you dictate, even if the majority of the nation disagrees. I mean, Donald Trump did win the popular vote, and y'all have been struggling to recognize that ever since. So stay off the roads and stay home Friday. God bless you. The rest of us will enjoy our day without you. Old Glory Bank is a bank for conservatives. It is a bank for freedom. You don't have to worry about debanking trends so much with Donald Trump in the White House, but what happens when he's gone? What if the left gets back in and they start targeting conservatives again and trying to get banks to stop banking with them? Old Glory Bank wants to protect your privacy and your rights to bank. OldGloryBank.com/Eric is where you go. Sign up to get an account with Old Glory Bank. OldGloryBank.com/ERICK. I have a checking account and a savings account with them. If you're a business, they work very, very well with businesses. Even though they're an online bank, they get to know you. Their lending team gets to know you if you need help with lending and other issues. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. They're actually about to go through a reverse, a DS-PAC. They were funded through an S-PAC, and now they're going to be traded on NASDAQ, which is also very cool. They're growing, one of the fastest growing banks in the nation, and they'd love to be your bank. Check them out at OldGloryBank.com/Eric, OldGloryBank.com/ERICK. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply.